with complaints when you're surprised by some of the stuff we say today. A few of the questions that people have about reincarnation, things that hopefully we'll be addressing today, are: is this right now our present reality? Is this our first time on Earth? Why would a soul be reincarnated? If reincarnation is real, why don't we remember our past lives? And if we are reincarnated after we die, then when exactly does our soul go to heaven and experience that intimacy with its source, with God? And can a human soul be reincarnated in a non-human body? As always, we're going to be turning to Jewish sources for insight and guidance on this very intricate topic. Tonight, because we're discussing about something so soulful, most of our sources will be from the Kabbalah. Kabbalah, literally in Hebrew, means something that was received. It comes from the Hebrew word likabel, meaning to get, to receive. So if you're asking me how we know this stuff, it comes from the Kabbalah. It was passed down from Moses on Sinai down through the ages. And tonight we're going to be focusing mostly on the Lurianic text. Is anybody familiar with that terminology, Lurianic? About 400 years ago, there was a sage by the name of, we call him the Arizal. I'm sorry?
No.
There was a man by the name of the Arizal, or the Ari HaKadosh. She lived in the city of Safed, Sfas, in Eretz Yisrael, in Israel. And he is the authoritative figure on this topic specifically. In general, most Kabbalah that people learn today, particularly Hasidus, stems from Lurianic Kabbalah. So almost all the sources we're going to be calling tonight, it's not going to be a lot of sources from the Talmud or from the Mishnah. We generally from Kabbalah, particularly the works of the Arizal. Interestingly, you should know this, the Arizal did not himself write anything. He actually died at a very young age. He only wrote 3 short poems that we sing on Shabbat, but he had a student by the name of Rabbi Chaim Vital, who was authorized to transcribe some of his teachers' teachings. And that's how we know most of the what we call the Kisvei Arizal, the writings of the Arizal.
These mathematics.
So we're going to get into that tonight. One second, let me just hit that mute button. As always, if you have a question, feel free to hop in. But please remember that a lot of the questions you're going to have will be addressed through the course of the class tonight. And as ever, we will be here. I'm going to stay here after class is over to answer any questions you might have. So I want to begin by seeing how you feel about reincarnation. Do you like the idea of reincarnation, or is it something that disturbs you? And why or why not? Sophia's giving me a thumbs up. I don't know what that means. Is that you like the idea or not so much?
I like it.
Why is that so, Sophia?
I like having a positive outlook and an optimistic outlook, and I like to think that it doesn't just end here.
Okay.
That I can somehow still continue to have a positive influence, some way or another.
Okay. All right. Okay. Very good. Shalom, you wanted to say something?
Yeah. I just wanted to say that it kind of makes me uncomfortable because there's so many variations of it. You have the Eastern religions, their version of it, and then the whole thing of going into an inanimate object. There's just too many variations on that theme. So I'm very uncomfortable with it.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Hopefully by the end of tonight's class, you won't be as uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see the Jewish view on reincarnation, and we'll see how that sits with you. You had something to say, Jay?
View on reincarnation. I think I already have the Jewish view on reincarnation.
Okay, good.
Which is that we ourselves leave what we put into this earth is what we leave behind, and that we become soil makers, and that does regenerate.
I think you'll be surprised, but Shalom, do me a favor. Next time you want to speak, there's something wrong with your audio. I don't know what it is.
Okay.
Very low. All right. Okay, before we continue, anybody else want to hop in? Jay, unmute yourself.
Yes, Rabbi.
No, Jay, you're muted. Still muted.
How about that now?
Yeah, now you're good.
Good. Well, my father used to, I remember we used to go to the family doctor, and my father would tell the doctor exactly what was wrong with him and with himself, and give him the names of all the medications that should be prescribed for him, all the technical scientific names. Mm-hmm. And he never studied this stuff, had no knowledge of it, but just in the middle of nowhere, the names just came to him. So he always believed that he was here before as a doctor.
That is a possibility. You're going to see that if this was the case, it's an extreme rarity. You'll see that in the Jewish view, that's an extreme rarity that he should have that memory. But let's actually start right in the beginning. If you want, before we go in, you could take a look at student page 175. There's an exercise with 7 different questions. We're actually going to rip through it real quick just to see where we are in our thoughts about reincarnation Judaism. Question 1. If you give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down for true or false. Question 1, true or false, belief in reincarnation is basic to Judaism. Thumbs up for true, thumbs down for false. Melissa says thumbs down, thumbs up. Okay, we got a mixed reaction. Good. Number 2, in the Jewish view, reincarnation means that a soul that inhabited one body returns to inhabit another. True or false? Okay, mixed. Okay, good. Mixed is good. Mixed is great. Number 3, a human soul can be reincarnated in a non-human entity, such as an animal or plant. Thumbs up or thumbs down? Okay.
Down.
Number 4, a reincarnated soul does not have its own identity, but shares its identity with someone who lived in a previous lifetime. True or false?
False.
Okay. Mixed again. The purpose of doing good in one's current lifetime is to be reincarnated as a person of higher status. True or false?
True.
Okay.
True.
A soul is reincarnated as a penalty for sins committed in a prior life. True or false?
False.
Okay. 7, most souls today are reincarnations. True or false?
Doubtful.
Okay. We'll see. I'm very glad that we had a mixed response to most of those questions. Let's get into it. Before we go any further, we're going to start with the first question: does Judaism believe in reincarnation? And I'll tell you that yes. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having this conversation, probably, right? In the Krishma Sha'alamita, the Shema prayer that's meant to be said right before bedtime, we read the following: text 1 on page 176. And this text from the Siddur, from the prayer book, is actually found in every traditional prayer book. Master of the universe, I hereby forgive anyone who has angered or vexed me or sinned against me, either financially, physically, or financially, against my honor or anything else that is mine, whether accidentally or intentionally, inadvertently or deliberately, by speech or by deed, in this incarnation or in another. Begilgul zeh or begilgul acher. That's how you say incarnation, reincarnation. I might use that terminology tonight. So if you hear me say gilgul, that is the Hebrew word for what we call reincarnation. So we see right off the bat that every prayer book says in the Shema that it's possible that we'll have more than one incarnation. That we have the Kain Begilgul Zeh, Hain Begilgul Acher. So we see very clearly that it does come from, there is a Jewish idea of reincarnation. So now, what is the point? Why do we have reincarnation? What's the point behind it? Where did it come from? What are the dynamics? So before we do that and explain the mechanisms of reincarnation, first we're going to have to discuss a larger issue. It happens to be a very big and important question. We just spent all of last week talking about how after you finish your life's work here in this world, you go through the purification process of Gehenna, and then you go to paradise, you go to Gan Eden. And after telling me that I'm just going to shoot back around, when am I going to heaven? Who's in heaven exactly? What's going on? If souls are just coming back down onto earth through a reincarnation process, so who's sitting in Gan Eden? Who's sitting in Gehenna even? If the job isn't yet finished, and we're coming back down here into this world through reincarnation. So to understand the purpose and function of reincarnation, we first have to understand, we're actually going to talk about the history of souls. Again, I want you to remember that this is all coming from the Kabbalah. And this first text we're going to read, text 2, is from Rabbi Chaim Vital. Thank you for joining us, Judy. Didn't have you miss much. Rabbi Chaim Vital discussing the history of souls. Text 2 on page 177. It all began with one master soul, the son of Adam, which included all future souls. Subsequently, this master soul passed on to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and was then divided among the 12 tribes. Afterward, the soul was further partitioned among the 70 souls, meaning the descendants of Jacob, that accompanied him to Egypt, and eventually among the 600,000 souls who left Egypt. So another thing we should preface that tonight we're talking about reincarnation for a Jewish soul, the process of reincarnation for a Jewish soul. There is a reincarnation process for non-Jewish souls as well, but we're not going to focus on that tonight because we have enough to talk about with Jewish reincarnation. So we're going to talk about that instead. So what we're saying here in text 2 is that human existence, we know, began with one human being, Adam. So as the first human being, Adam also possessed the master soul, so to speak, the root soul. And then that master soul was passed down to the forefathers, Abraham, Isaac and Jacob, each of whom had that master soul. And that single general master soul then branched out first into the 12 tribes, then into the 70 descendants to Egypt, and then to the 600,000 people who left Egypt, the 600 people who stood at Sinai. According to Kabbalah, this number of 600,000 is incredibly significant because these 600,000 souls are the root of each and every soul of all subsequent generations. All of us today are an aspect of one of those root souls. We're going to use that terminology, root souls. A root soul is somebody who was present at Sinai and possessed a specific soul, a specific type of soul called the root soul, and all the neshamas, all the souls that we have up today are aspects of those souls. Think of this process a little bit like a tree that begins with a single trunk and then divides and further subdivides into many limbs, branches, twigs, leaves, etc., etc. We start out with one, you have the one tree, and then you end up with a great diversity. And this process is also true in biology, right? You have a new organism starts as a single cell, which divides and breaks up into many different parts. In general, that idea of a single body is used a lot in the Kabbalah of the Jewish people. This idea that even though we're separate souls, we have our distinct personalities, and as we're going to see later on today, missions in this world, we're all part of one body. So now, back to the Shar HaGilgulim, back to that text from the Arizal. Text 3 on page 178. Furthermore, you must know that every person must fulfill all of the 613 mitzvahs. If a soul does not fulfill all 613 mitzvot in action, speech, and thought, must be reincarnated until it completes them all. So this first text of the Arizal is touching on this idea that those 600,000 souls who stood at Sinai were given a mission. What was their mission? Their mission was to improve the world. How? Through the study of Torah and mitzvahs. All 600,000 souls that were present at the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai were given that mission, which is to reveal God's presence throughout the world, which is what the neshama's job is. How do we accomplish that? Through the fulfillment of all of the 613 mitzvahs given at Sinai, both positive and negative. And here's the key point. Every one of those 600,000 participants at Sinai, each one of those 600,000, what we'll call founding or root souls, have that responsibility. We're tasked with that specific mission. This world has a purpose, a goal, a destination. And each of the 600,000 souls plays a vital role in that grand plan. Each of the souls come down into this world to spiritually rectify their bodies and their portion of the world. And how does the soul do that? Through accomplishing the 613 mitzvahs, the Torah's do's and don'ts. And each positive mitzvah rectifies a limb of the body and a part of the world, and avoiding any negative prohibitions prevent the soul from causing spiritual harm either to the body itself or to the world at large. Each neshama has a unique mission, and when it accomplishes its mission, it also gains spiritual rectification and elevation, even though that's not really the point of its coming to this world. The point of the world, of its descent to the world, is its mission. But if it fulfills its mission, it gets spiritual elevation as well. So now think about this: 613 mitzvahs. There are few, if any, of those 600,000 founding souls that were able to complete all 613 mitzvahs in their first lifetime. Positive mitzvahs were unfulfilled. Negative mitzvahs were probably violated. And most importantly, there were parts of the world that remained unrectified. So reincarnation, or like we say in Hebrew, Gilgul, exists in order to give a chance for those souls, and through them, the entire universe, to complete their mission and affect completion. So again, each one of these souls was told to finish through 630 mitzvahs. It's a very hard task to accomplish, all 630 mitzvahs. It's not even possible for most people to do it in one lifetime. So in order to accomplish that, the soul is given another chance, what we call Gilgul, reincarnation. We're not done yet. I need to introduce another idea. In addition to having to fulfill all 630 mitzvahs, there's another mission that each root soul has. Bear with me here. Text 4. Mastering the orchard, text 4. You should also realize that each individual must study all 4 of the Torah's layers, which are referred to by the acronym Pardes, orchard. These are Pshat, Remez, Drush, and Soid. Literal, allusion, exegetic, and mystical. It is necessary for a soul to be reincarnated repeatedly until it completes them all. This is an important idea. We might have touched upon it in a different course, but I don't think we talked about it at all in this course. There is this idea, according to tradition, that every Torah idea can be understood in 4 general ways. You have Pshat, Remez, Drush, and Soid. And I'll explain it to you briefly. I'm also going to show a video which does a very good job illustrating this point in a second. But very briefly, Pshat is that simple interpretation of the words. Remez, it means hints and allusions. Sometimes they're the hints are inferred from the general context, and sometimes they're delivered via a specific word or letter usage, sometimes through gematria. Gematria is the numerical value of words. Or you might notice that certain words in the Torah have bigger letters or smaller letters, like the beginning of this week's Torah portion. Vayikra, the aleph, the last letter in the word Vayikra, is very small. And there's all sorts of remazim, there's all sorts of hints that are hidden in that. Then the third level, you have drush, which is when we extrapolate layers of ideas and instructions through a Torah portion. That's what most of the Talmud spends the time, is the idea of drush. And then you have sod. Sod is the mystical, secret, esoteric parts of the Torah, what most of us refer to as Kabbalah. So every one of those 600,000 souls, aside from having to accomplish all 613 mitzvahs, also has to learn all of the Torah in all four of those layers, in the Pshat, Remez, Drush, and Sod. And even more than this, within each level of the four general ways of understanding the Torah, there are 600,000 ways of understanding, which are specific to each one of those neshamas, each one of those root souls. So part of the neshamas, part of the root soul's mission here in this world is to learn the entire Torah, and also to innovate something within Torah, in the world of Pshat, in the world of Remez, and in the world of Drush, in the world of Sod. To further explain this idea of Pardes, of the four levels of Torah, the four general ways of learning Torah, I'm going to share now a video with you. Just give me 1 second. Let me find the video and then share screen. Give me 1 second. Just to give us an idea of what it means, the different levels in the learning of Torah. Okay, 1 second, I'm going to share screen. Share sound, optimize the clip. Here we go.
Okay. Kevin did this. Yes, step by step, you have to keep shooting. I said, no, you have to do this one.
When?
Today.
Oh,
Human authors express themselves in their works, both directly and subtly, sometimes intentionally and always subconsciously. When we read a text, we can choose either to read the lines or to engage in more intricate analysis and read between the lines. The divine author of the Torah did something similar, but to an infinitely greater degree. God expressed himself in the text in multiple ways all at once, directly as well as subtly, with plenty of insinuation and a vast hidden layer of the divine subconscious. And he then instructed us to excavate it all. Jewish tradition separates these layers of understanding into four categories. The first is pshat, direct intention, which is derived by examining context and syntax. For example, the Torah begins with the words, Bereshis bara Elokim, es hashemayim, ve'es haaretz. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. On the plainest level of Torah understanding, this is a straightforward statement of what happened at the beginning of time. But the simple meaning is not always easy to clarify. Many biblical commentators, most notably Rabbi Shlomo Yitzhaki, the 11th century French scholar known universally as Rashi, devoted their efforts to clarifying the straightforward meaning of the often mysterious biblical texts. Our second layer of understanding is remez, allusion. This refers to subtle communications that are encoded in the text. They can be uncovered using methods such as the numerical values of the Hebrew letters, the acronyms of words and phrases, or unusually sized letters in the Torah scroll. For example, the Torah's first two words, Bereshis bara, in the beginning, God created, carry the numerical value of 1,116. That's the identical value of the phrase Barosh Hashanah Nivra. It was created on Rosh Hashanah. We are thereby informed that Rosh Hashanah is the anniversary of creation. Our third layer of understanding is drush, interpretive. Our sages extrapolate a vast corpus of ideas and instruction from the Torah's text through methods such as textual comparison, sequencing analysis, and homiletical interpretation. For example, from a sequencing perspective, the Torah begins with the wrong beginning. It describes creation, a narrative that is seemingly secondary to the Torah's primary function as a book of guidance that tells us how God expects us to act on a daily basis. The Torah should have dived directly into the nitty-gritty of the laws. On the interpretive level, however, the Torah first describes creation to tackle a major hurdle to Torah observance. The majority of Torah laws rely on the Jewish nation owning and settling the land of Israel. We were instructed to conquer the land and never relinquish our claim of ownership over it. But such a radical claim to a territory is bound to provoke opposition. Who gives us the right to take possession of a land and claim it as our eternal heritage? The Torah, therefore, begins with creation, clarifying that God is the creator of all territories, and he has the right to permanently bequeath a specific parcel to a particular people. It then records the history of God doing precisely that with the Jewish people. With this switch in sequence, the Torah supplies the Jews with the response God expects them to provide all who accuse them of land theft and occupation. The fourth layer of understanding is sod, hidden meaning. This refers to the deeply mystical messages that float behind every phrase and letter in the Torah. For example, the word Bereshis can be split perfectly into two words, bara, shis, meaning he created six. God first formed the six emotive divine attributes, from chesed, kindness, through yesod, attachment, as described in Jewish mysticism. God then used these six attributes to create the actual universe. So there you have a sampling of the four layers of understanding that can be found in the Torah's very first words. Beyond this, a vast ocean of knowledge is contained in these same words. And beyond that stretches the infinite vastness of wisdom contained in the rest of the Torah's close to 80,000 words.
So even though it's a little bit off topic of tonight's discussion, I still felt it was worthwhile because it's a very general idea that we should know about the different levels in understanding the Torah. And on top of the fact that there's four general levels in the way we learn Torah, Kabbalah teaches us that each one of these levels, every single idea in Torah, has 600,000 interpretations. In Pshat, 600,000 interpretations. In Rambam, 600,000 interpretations in Drush, and finally in Sod. Why? Because each one of those ideas corresponds to another one of those root souls that were at Sinai. So every one of those root souls has its part of the Torah that it's related to. And this actually helps us understand a text which we're going to read together. Sophia, I'm going to actually ask you to read source 5, text 5 on page 179, if you don't mind. First one, text 5a, and then 5b.
I actually don't have my book on me today. I'm sorry, I'm out of town.
No worries. Alan, how about you? Could you mind reading? On page 179. This is something that we say after every one of the Amida prayers, after every one of the silent prayers.
May it be your will, our God and God of our fathers, that the Holy Temple be rebuilt speedily in our days, and grant us our portion in your Torah.
And grant us our portion in your Torah. So the fact that we want God to rebuild the temple, that we understand. But what does it mean that we want to be granted our portion in the Torah? What does our portion in the Torah mean? Alan, please read text 5b. It's on the next page.
As explained in numerous sources, the soul of each Jew has a specific segment of the Torah with which it is particularly associated. This explains the phrasing of our sages' statement, grant us our portion in your Torah. Our portion implies that each of us has a unique portion within the Torah. This concept is further expressed in their sages' statement that there are novel Torah concepts that an accomplished student of the Torah is destined to introduce. Talmud Megillah 19b. In other words, the entire universe anticipates the birth of this particular diligent student, awaiting the moment that the student innovates, meaning uncovers the specific concept within the Torah. For this concept is this student's portion in the Torah.
So not only must each root soul study all 4 dimensions of the entire Torah, but each one of those souls must uncover its unique part of the Torah, and all of creation, so to speak, waits for that soul to complete its task. If the soul has not completed this task in a certain lifetime, it must be reincarnated until it does. So in summation, you could see this on the screen. Every soul has, okay, we said it. The mission of the soul is to complete all 613 mitzvahs, study all 4 layers of the Torah, and reveal its unique portion of the Torah. This is a lot. It's a lot. It's much more than one lifetime can handle. And that's why we have the concept of reincarnation. But now I would like to actually talk about the mechanism, what exactly reincarnation is. What exactly reincarnation is. Reincarnation, it's important for us to know, understand that one of the big misconceptions when it comes to the idea of Gilgul in Judaism is that souls get recycled. A lot of times when people talk about reincarnation, we think it's just recycled. Somebody lived, I don't know, 150 years ago. He was a farmer in the Ukraine and he died. So now I'm here to fulfill his mission. Or there was somebody who lived 3,000 years ago, whatever. And I'm just recycled and we're just redoing, we're just filling somebody else's position, somebody else's job. But what I want to do now is read from text 6 on page 182, where the Arizal really firmly rejects this idea. And I'll tell you the honest truth. When I was growing up, I understood reincarnation as just being the recycling of souls. I thought that, yeah, my neshama, my soul must have been here before. It had its own history and did what it did what it didn't do. And I'm just here again. And it's just, deja vu. And I'll tell you the honest truth, I never enjoyed that. I never enjoyed that personally, that idea that, first of all, I have that all the guys hang-ups, whatever he did, whatever she did, whatever she didn't do. And it feels a little, I don't know if the right word is claustrophobic, but this idea that you have somebody else's baggage with you, whether for good or for ill, that you're not yourself. You're somebody else's soul. You're just a recycled soul that never sat well with it. So the Arizal actually very firmly rejects this idea in text 6. And I'm going to read it out loud, and then we'll discuss it further. Okay? All right. Again, text 6 on page 182. Although we've stated in numerous passages of this treatise, we've even said it today, that a specific individual soul was reincarnated in a particular person, and it was subsequently reincarnated in another specific individual, and so on, do not misread this as implying that the original soul itself is reincarnated repeatedly. Don't think the Arizal is telling us that when we use the word Gilgul, that the neshama comes back, is that it's the same exact neshama coming back. Rather, each human soul branches out into innumerable roots. Every root contains an infinite quantity of soul sparks. With each subsequent reincarnation, a number of these sparks are rectified, and they ascend to enjoy the rewards of heaven and dwell in the particular strata of Gan Eden that are appropriate for them. However, those soul sparks that were not rectified are reincarnated to provide further opportunity for rectification. So what does this mean? What this reading is telling us is that the perceptions most of us, and I'll tell you the truth, what I used to have of Gilgulim is largely inaccurate. There are the aforementioned root souls, the ones that stood at Sinai, the 600,000, or we might call them stem souls, that are capable of generating other souls. Each one of those souls contains sparks of godliness within them that must be elevated. There's a certain amount of sparks that you have to elevate through your work here in this world. Every soul that manages to elevate even one spark has successfully completed a mission here on earth, and it merits a portion in the world to come. But what about those sparks that did not accomplish? What about those mitzvahs that it was not able to do? The Torah that it could not learn? And because of whatever reason, tasks that the soul has failed to complete. So then a new soul must come into being in order to elevate those sparks. So a new soul, so to speak, is grafted from the stem soul, like a new tree grafted from an old one. Think of it this way: when you have a lemon tree, and you take a branch from the lemon tree and plant it elsewhere, and you graft it elsewhere, is it the same lemon tree or is it a new tree with some of that DNA of the stem tree? Or here's another wild example. I recently took my son Shua to the Liberty Science Center in Edison, New Jersey. And over there, there's this whole project that some scientists in Canada is working on. They found some viable cells, some viable DNA from woolly mammoths frozen in the permafrost in Siberia. And they're hoping to be able to reproduce mammoths, living mammoths, with those cells. So now, if they succeed, which doesn't seem too likely, but whatever, if they hypothetically were able to succeed, is that mammoth the same mammoth that lived 5,000 years ago and walked across Russia? No. It's a completely new mammoth, but using some of that other mammoth DNA. So the idea of reincarnation is very much the same idea. When we come back into this world, it's not that we're just another recycled neshama, that we went back up there and it comes back down. let's break it down this way. Every neshama, every soul contains soul sparks, which are the individual pieces of its mission that he has to elevate through Torah and mitzvahs. When you fulfill a mitzvah or you learn Torah properly, that rectifies and completes that corresponding soul spark. So now that soul spark has found fulfillment. When a person passes, all those completed soul sparks return to the divine source, and that neshama, that soul who lived for that lifetime, gets to experience the warmth and glow of their creator, what we call Gan Eden, paradise. The remaining soul sparks fall into one of two categories. You have those that are unrectified soul sparks that result from a mitzvah not being done, somebody not praying when they needed to, somebody not putting on tefillin, not lighting Shabbat candles, or a portion of Torah that could not be studied. And those soul sparks are grafted into a new soul that carries on this mission and gives it and is given another chance to rectify those specific sparks. That's category A. Category B are those sparks that are damaged through negative actions, when you do something wrong. So those aren't simply missed opportunities. Those actions harm those soul sparks. So that damage is repaired either through the cleansing process of Gehenna, or we'll talk about a little bit through a specific type of reincarnation, not the general type of reincarnation. Now, the soul sparks that still need rectification are regenerated into a new neshama that has a whole mission to fulfill, but specifically, and this is very important, the primary mission of this new branch soul is the rectification of those reincarnated soul sparks. This means that as long as the new soul rectifies those sparks, it fulfills its mission. Sorry, I did not turn off the ringer on this guy. By the way, how's the audio? Because I'm using the headphones. The audio is
Good,
okay?
good, fine.
Sounds clear?
Fine.
Okay.
Questions yet or no?
Oh, give me 1 second.
Okay, sure.
Actually, no, yeah, let's go with questions.
Okay, why must we wait to lose our temporal body before we can start reincarnating our soul or changing our soul within us now? Is it limited to the physical body that makes the body more powerful than the soul, in a sense, that the soul is trapped within this mortal coil?
Well, Torah and mitzvot, so I'm not sure what your question is exactly, but Torah and mitzvot are only accomplished through a body.
Can the soul be changed in the body we have now while we are here? You see, as people are born again and all this stuff. Can you be changing our soul as we go along? So it's a different soul than we had when we were 20.
So there is an idea we're going to touch on in a second, which if you thought what we're talking about is far out till now, wait till you go on further. It gets much wackier, trust me. But I think more to your point, in Judaism, there's an idea called tshuva, which means to return.
Yes.
Some people translate it as repentance. It's a misnomer. Tshuva means return. So in general, we talked about this in the past, I think lesson 3, we talked about this idea that most of your neshama does not actually enter your body, correct?
Yeah, all right.
Right? You have the 3 levels of your neshama that animate your physical body, your emotive qualities, your intellectual qualities. Then you have the infinite parts of your neshama, which stay on high. They're referred to as chaya and yechida, the essential neshama. So most of our lives, we don't necessarily access those parts of our neshama, but it's possible through tshuva to access those parts of our neshama, and for all intents and purposes, become a different person, which I think is similar to the idea you're touching on. The power of tshuva is incomparable to any other power any other mitzvah has. But that's a whole separate discussion, so I don't want to get too sidetracked. But there is this idea that through tshuva you could access more of your essential neshama than you ever had to this point in your life. But most broadly, the reason behind reincarnation is because the neshama has to do its work in this body, in this world, right? Mm-hmm. And the most important idea I want from this section, before we move on to talking about non-normative types of reincarnation, is this idea that we are not recycled neshamas. We're not recycled souls. There's our new souls, which are carrying on the mission of the souls of that stem soul, right? You have the 600,000 stem souls that branch off into different neshamas. And if you didn't accomplish that first stem neshama, didn't accomplish his mission in its first lifetime, which is incredibly unlikely. Like we said, 613 mitzvahs, all of the Torah. It's very unlikely you're able to accomplish that in one go. So another neshama is created with the opportunity to fulfill the mission.
How does the new soul know what was not accomplished?
So how do you know what to do? That we're going to get to it towards the end of class.
With the scorecard.
We're going to get to that at the end of class, towards the end of the class. And actually, not so much time, in a little bit. So For now, we're going to put to bed the normal reincarnation. And then we're going to talk about weird reincarnations. All right? Like I said, if you thought what we've talked about till now was far out there, it gets weirder. All right? We talked about typical forms of reincarnation. Simply, what we mean is that the purpose of that reincarnation is to rectify unfulfilled sparks through a newly generated branch soul. But there are other variations of reincarnation, and I'll tell you two of them. The first is partial reincarnation, meaning that sometimes instead of the unfulfilled soul spark regenerating an entire new soul, they instead append themselves onto an existing neshama. And in Kabbalah, we call this ibur, or soul pregnancy, where an existing soul hosts a piece of a prior soul. Let's see how that Rizal explains it, and then we'll go from there. Text 7a on page 183. The concept of Gilgul reincarnation is that a soul requiring further rectification enters the body of a child as it emerges from its mother's womb to serve as a newborn soul. It has no permission to leave that individual until the person's destined day of death. By contrast, the concept of ibur, or soul impregnation, is that a soul enters an adult body that is already inhabited by a soul. The person's primary soul received at birth. In this case, the individual is merely impregnated with a guest soul in addition to harboring a primary soul. The individual then carries the extra soul, much as a woman carries a child in their womb. So in Gilgul, the normative way of reincarnation, as we said before, then the sparks of the previous soul become the new soul for the next incarnation. In the second body soul, from the moment it is born until it dies, it is the soul, it's the neshama. In the ibur, the sparks already just graft themselves, so to speak, on a soul that's already inhabiting an adult body. So what's the point? And also, it doesn't last for its entire lifetime. What's the purpose of ibur? What's the objective? Why would this happen? So for two purposes. A soul experiences ibur for one of two reasons. Text 7b, 184. A, the impregnated soul comes to an individual for its own sake. In its previous life, it failed to perform a particular mitzvah and was therefore left lacking. This was the kind of mitzvah that was impossible to perform under the conditions of that lifetime, such as the mitzvah of yibum, chalitza, and the like. It is therefore not obligated to engage in a full-scale incarnation described earlier in the treatise. For soul impregnation is sufficient. So the first reason you might have something called ibur is because there are certain mitzvahs that are practically, functionally impossible for some people to accomplish.
Being given the gift of the soul.
For example, there's a mitzvah called chalitza and yibum. It's called the levirate marriage. Not to get too far into the weeds, but briefly, if a man dies without leaving children, so his brother is obligated to marry his dead brother's wife in order to carry his brother's name down to future generations. That's called yibum. If one of the parties involved, if the woman doesn't want to marry the brother because she liked the first brother, who says I like the other brother, they do something called chalitza, where they basically absolve each other of this responsibility. So now, in the first place, yibum and chalitza are very, very rare. It doesn't happen all the time. There are certain situations that have to take place. And secondly, even if I would live the life where I was given the opportunity to do yibum or chalitza, it's an either-or proposition. It's impossible for one person to do both mitzvahs. It's impossible. Because you either marry the wife, your brother's wife, or you decide this isn't for me, or she decides it isn't for you. It's an either-or proposition. And they're both counted in the 613 mitzvahs of the Torah. So now, the idea of ibur, the idea of the soul impregnation, is that there are certain mitzvahs that you could not do through no fault of your own. For example, a lot of people are not kohanim, are not priests. One of the mitzvahs in the Torah are that priests should give blessings on festivals. Not everybody could do that. So let's say you were born, you were not a priest. You couldn't do that. And you did everything you could do. So Hashem doesn't make you. God doesn't say you have to go and reincarnate yourself and live another 70 years on this world. When there's another neshama already in a body who's about to do that mitzvah, you're given an opportunity. That neshama is given an opportunity to impregnate the soul by latching on for those few minutes to do that mitzvah and to fulfill its mission. Okay, that's the first reason why we might have this ibur, this impregnation. The second reason you might have impregnation will continue in the text 7b, where it says B. The impregnated soul comes solely to assist an individual to bring a person additional merit or to guide an individual in matters of Torah and mitzvot. In this case, the impregnated soul lacks nothing for itself. The second idea is that occasionally, if a person merits it, they're given a supernatural boost of energy from the soul of a righteous man or woman, from the soul of a tzaddik, to help them in their mission in this world. So it's not a normal occurrence, but occasionally if somebody is trying their best and doing the work as they could, occasionally they're gifted this kind of, you ever played in the arcade games, the racing games, and you get nitro boost once in a while? So you get a nitro boost from God, your neshama gets an extra jolt from on high. That's the idea of partial reincarnation. But again, this isn't normative, this isn't normal, but I felt that we should mention it before moving on. I understand this is far out there, but like I said, this whole idea of reincarnation, the shamas, it's all Kabbalah stuff. The more you learn Kabbalah, the further out in the weeds you get. So now, one of the questions we asked, the true or false questions were, can a neshama be reincarnated in non-human form? Can you be reincarnated into a rabbit?
Rabbi,
Yes, Shelley.
can a reincarnation soul be in opposition to what's there already?
So, no. The
No?
impregnated neshama either is not felt.
They have to be
Unless-
agreeable, they have to be compatible,
I'm sorry?
they have to be compatible, they can't be at odds.
You're talking about the partial reincarnation or the full
Yes.
reincarnation?
The full or the reincarnation.
So the full reincarnation, it's a whole new soul. There's nothing to be compatible with. It's
Okay.
a new entity coming into a new body. There's no prior consciousness.
The body doesn't have anything before the reincarnation?
No. Okay, so back to this question, can a neshama, can a Jewish soul be reincarnated into a non-human form? So to answer that question, we actually need to answer another question first. How many times can a neshama be reincarnated? How many times can this happen? So the Arizal tells us on page 185 in text 8, when a human soul comes to the world and becomes soiled by sin in the process, it reincarnates in another body to rectify itself. That second life is its first reincarnation. If it fails to rectify itself during that lifetime, it may return in a second reincarnation. If it again fails to find rectification, it may endure a third reincarnation. After that, however, it is no longer provided opportunities for rectification via reincarnation. So in the unlikely events that Arizal is telling us over here, that a soul has been reincarnated 3 times, excluding its original descent, and the damage has not been rectified at all, hasn't made any progress, at this point, it is no longer reincarnated in human form. This limit, it's important to stress, does not apply to a soul that has made some progress in its rectification. Now, for those souls that have maxed out their limits, they're out of lives and they have no more quarters to put into the arcade. They've been here for 4 times and they haven't made any headway at all in their mission for whatever reason. So then they have another form of reincarnation available. Can I have a volunteer to read text 9? Text 9. Anybody?
Oh, it is?
M. Shalom. Go ahead. Text 9, 186.
Behold,
God,
go ahead.
behold, God does all of these twice or thrice with man. The limitation of twice or thrice applies with man, meaning that a human soul is not subsequently reincarnated in a human body. Rather, it is forced to wander the planet until it is reincarnated in an inanimate, vegetative, or animal entity. Then, after it has done its penance, there is hope for its future, for God's endless mercies extend to all of his creatures.
So in this form of reincarnation, the reincarnation serves a very different purpose than regular incarnation, and therefore it operates within a different framework. As we said before, reincarnation in a human form is to give you the unrectified spark another chance to rectify itself. But reincarnation in a non-human form, whether it's an animal, plant, or inanimate form, whatever it might be, this is painful for the neshama. Why? Because the human soul is meant to be expressed in a human body. The human soul cannot express itself in an animal's body, or in a vegetable's body, or in a rock's body. Everything that exists has a neshama. Everything that exists has a soul, including animal life, plant life, and non-animate matter. Everything has a soul. But a human soul is specific for a human body. It's meant to express itself in a human body. And when it is forced to be reincarnated in something that is not a human form, it's very painful for the body. It's very painful, for the neshama. It's like somebody being trapped in a duffel bag because it's limited by the body that it's given. It's limited in the space that it's given. So this reincarnation serves a very similar purpose to what we discussed when we were talking about Gehenna. You remember last week we spoke about Gehenna. The Jewish idea of hell is not a punishment for the neshama. It's just an opportunity for the neshama to cleanse itself, to purify itself in order to go to the next stage. So reincarnation into a non-human form serves a very similar purpose. That is, through the anguish of the neshama being trapped in a non-human form, it experiences rectification and purification and is able to move on to the next stage in its existence. All right. Okay. Before we move on, that's the idea of reincarnation in non-human souls. So in short, the non-human reincarnation is a very rare possibility that exists as a last resort when you come down once, twice, 3, 4 times and made no headway in your mission. And it's given the neshama an opportunity to rectify itself through the painful experience of an animal reincarnation. Before we move on, does anybody have any more questions? Oh, wow. Okay, I have a ton of questions. I'm glad that none of you have questions. All right. Let's go to this next idea. I think it's something that Jay touched upon, right? So as a general rule, according to the Arizal, it's a general rule, 99.9% of all neshamas that are alive today are gilgulim, are reincarnated souls. Our souls are spun off of the 600,000 original souls and are each given with a specific job. We have to elevate specific sparks. We have specific missions, specific mitzvahs we need to do. And once all the sparks of all the root souls are perfected, then our mission in revealing God's presence in this world will be complete for all of humanity, all of the world, for all of the Jewish people. And then we'll be able to enter the Messianic age. But how do we know? So can we know, right? If we have a specific mission in this world, so can we know who or what our parent soul was in its previous life? Or what is our specific mission in this world? If we know who we were before, so maybe we could figure out what we need to do now. If we know the experiences of our neshama, so past times it was on this earth, maybe we'll be able to, in the future, be able to understand what our mission is right now in the present. So text 10 on page 187 addresses this question. Text 10. Melissa, do me a favor. Could you read text 10 if you don't mind?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, 197, right?
On page 197, correct. 187, 187.
Or 187. Text. In English, right? Or in Hebrew?
Yes, please.
Okay. It is impossible to deduce or intuit whether one possesses a reincarnated soul or not, unless one is the recipient of a mystical communication in this regard. You may wonder, how then will we know the purpose for which we entered this world? Which mitzvah we must scrupulously perform, or which transgression we must especially avoid? The answers are naturally ingrained in us. We experience a natural affinity and longing to perform a certain mitzvah, and that mitzvah is critical to our present incarnation. Or our inclination strives especially hard to entice us to commit a particular sin, for it is the very same sin in which we blundered during our previous life.
So it's impossible for any of us, for most of us at least, to know or to feel our previous incarnation history, unless we have some insider information. Well, if you're a real Kabbalist, maybe you could understand. This is because, as we said, the soul is not synonymous with our normal process of memory. The mystics, the Kabbalists, define the identity of the soul as the godly spark, that's which gives it its mission and purpose, and not cognition and intellect, not consciousness. Thus, from a mystical, Kabbalistic perspective, there's no reason to say that one Gilgul is going to have any knowledge of a previous Gilgul. In different words, just as a neshama assumes a new body in reincarnation, it also has an entirely different personality, entirely different consciousness. The soul is a divine spark that gives life to both the body and the personality, but distinct from both. Interestingly, this text, the person who wrote this text, Rabbi Cordovero, gives us a very practical reason why we have no memory of our past incarnations, because we don't need all that baggage. You know, if I knew that your grandfather was mean to my grandfather 300 years ago, it wouldn't be good for anybody, you know? So it's a lot simpler that we don't remember. But the truth is, it's a completely different consciousness. It's a new neshama. Even though there is a reincarnation, you're continuing that mission. It's a completely new reincarnation. That secret of knowing the source of your neshama and the history of your neshama and its past incarnations is only accessible through divine spiritual revelation, which is, yes, there are certain instances that Kabbalists reveal to us fascinating secrets, but who is reincarnated in whom? There's a book It's actually accessible online if you want the link. There was a man by the name of the Re'ei Mipanu, a kabbalist who lived in Poland in the 15th century. He wrote a whole book describing figures in the Bible and the Talmud and their incarnations. For an example, Cain and Abel were reincarnated as Moses and Jethro, and Moses' wife Zipporah was reincarnated as the prophetess Devorah. Just for a small example. There's a whole book going through alphabetical order, through the order of the alphabets, different figures in the Bible and the Talmud, and telling us who comes from where. But for the rest of us, while we don't know our history and we don't know the different iterations of our stem cell, of the neshama klalos that we had, we still can identify our mission. How is it possible to identify our mission? Which areas we need to focus on? Through looking at both our strong points and at our weak points, looking at our strengths and our weaknesses. The good deeds for which we have a passion and the areas that we have a struggle with. Those are all indicators of our personal mission. The fact that you're given particular gifts, talents, passions is not a coincidence. It's not by accident. The fact that you have certain skills and gifts mean that they are meant to be used in fulfillment of your mission. The fact that you have certain urges and temptations also reflect on what your mission might be. And they all play a part in our mission here in this world. In fact, there's actually a great letter from the Rebbe, which we'll read together now, that drives this point home. It happens every once in a while, every 100 years or so, that a man might complain about his wife. It's been known to happen. So there's this man who was complaining to the Rebbe about his marriage situation, and that no matter how much he tries, it's not working. He's unhappy. There's not what we call in Hebrew, shalom bayis, peace in the home. So let's read the Rebbe's response to him, which I found very illuminating, text 11. Text 11, page 188. I'm replying to your letter in which you inform me that you accepted and are implementing my directives regarding Torah study classes and giving charity. But as far as the situation at home is concerned, your marital harmony appears only superficially to have improved, while the underlying reality remains unsatisfactory. So they were saying, yeah, you're doing all the good stuff, but your shalom bayis, your marital harmony is not where it should be. I already told you in my previous letters that it would be challenging. You are meant to find it difficult, for the success of your life's mission hinges upon your sincere efforts towards marital harmony. Our mystical teachings reveal that we individuals are born with original souls. The rest of us are reincarnations. We return to complete the fulfillment of the mitzvot that we missed in previous lifetimes. Certainly, we are obligated in all the mitzvahs in every lifetime, but the specific mitzvot we omitted in earlier incarnations are critical to the rectification of our souls and the rectification of this world. Using the evil inclination as a guide, we can identify the mitzvot that determine the outcome of our life's mission. Our inclination opposes the mitzvot that we finalized in previous lifetimes, but only to the degree necessary to create free choice between good and evil. By contrast, it unleashes a fierce storm of opposition with countless hurdles and challenges when we approach a mitzvah that we failed to fulfill in previous incarnations. Therefore, your many hurdles to marital harmony reveal its indispensability to rectification. Do whatever it takes to achieve harmony. So that was explaining to this man, the fact that you find this particular mitzvah incredibly difficult, and not normally difficult. There's challenges when it comes to doing any good thing, right? It's not hard, it's not worth doing. But the fact is that if there's areas in our lives that we find particularly challenging, this is an indicator to us that this is what our mission focus should be. The fact that it is particularly challenging us to do one specific thing, whether it's a mitzvah, whether it's a good deed, whether it's a particular area of learning Torah, that's because our evil inclination knows that this is part of our mission that we have to accomplish. So you have two sides of the same coin. When you're attracted to something, when there's something that you have a passion for, when there's something you have talent for, something you have a skill towards, that's an indicator that it's part of what you're meant to be accomplishing it. Otherwise, you wouldn't have those talents, those strengths, those passions. And on the flip side, when there's something that you just can't seem to break through the barrier for, there's something you can't seem to grasp, something you can't seem to accomplish, usually, the Rebbe is telling this person, it's an indication that it is in your best, this is also part of your mission focus. I actually would like to share with you another video from Rabbi Shais Taub with a meditation about this idea. I'm going to run through some slides first. Okay, here we go.
Today's reflection is going to help us try to relate to the idea that our souls came to the world this time around for a special purpose. A mitzvah, a good act that has special value in this lifetime. Now, how can we know such a thing? To a great extent, we can't. However, there's a way that we can catch a glimpse into what is important for the soul in this lifetime. And that is by way of a metaphor which we will now visualize. Picture in your mind's eye, you are leading an army out to battle. If the militaristic imagery is not to your liking, you can imagine a game of chess. Same idea applies. You're leading your army out to battle, and you begin to become aware that your opponent, your enemy, is focused on striking you in one particular spot. Now, it hadn't occurred to you that this spot has importance.
We're not seeing anything.
But from the fact that the enemy keeps
Rabbi?
focusing on it, keeps going after
Rabbi,
it.
we're not seeing anything on the screen.
Is anybody else seeing anything on the screen?
I'm seeing it.
Me too.
Okay,
Why
let's
are
try-
we not?
I see it.
I see it.
Turn
All
it.
right, all right.
Can you turn, Jimmy?
Okay, well, let me go back to it 1 second. Going the wrong way.
There.
Oh,
Jump
yeah,
ahead.
Yes.
okay.
Shift now and think about your life and think about a mitzvah or a good deed that is inordinately difficult for you. And by inordinately, what I mean is this. We all have mitzvahs that are harder and easier for all of us. But then there are mitzvahs that by all rights should be easy. It shouldn't be so challenging, and for some inexplicable reason, we just keep having resistance in that area. Why are we having inexplicably more resistance in that area? Why? Because it has that much more strategic importance, and therefore all things in the universe being counterbalanced, our Maker has allowed a special resistance, a special challenge to give us pushback in that one area that we most need to overcome. So imagine, connect to yourself, think of yourself, think of that area, that mitzvah that's the hardest for you, the one that keeps on challenging you. And now imagine it, rather than as something that you're frustrated about, imagine it as your most precious asset. So precious that the enemy is specifically focusing on it. Let's take a moment to try to think of that mitzvah that is the most difficult and to now see it as that mitzvah which in this lifetime is apparently the most important and most impactful. We'll take a moment now to envision this, to connect to this feeling. Feel yourself being empowered, knowing that this mitzvah has so much power, so much influence, and that is where the resistance is coming from.
This is an exercise that I think all of us could do. I personally benefited from using this meditation while I was preparing the class, and I think it's a worthwhile thought exercise. So there's actually one more clue to trying to identify what our portion in the world is, where our spark is lying, and that's expressed in text 12 on page 190. Text 12, page 190. From the moment that God instructed our forefather Abraham, go from your land, following which it is stated, Abram went traveling further southward, the mystical process of the rectification of divine sparks was launched. Basically, that from the time that Abraham started his mission, that's when it all started going. Subsequently, by decree of divine providence, individuals travel to the location in which the divine sparks that these specific individuals must rectify await their redemption. Saintly individuals with spiritual vision perceive the locations in which their divine sparks await their engagement, and they take the initiative to journey those locations. The rest of us are left in the hands of the primary cause behind all causes and the ultimate reason behind all reasons. God orchestrates countless apparent causes and circumstances to bring specific individuals to the locations for which their predestined service of rectification is required. So there are saintly individuals, this text is telling us, that they're able to perceive where my soul sparks are, and I'll go grab them and I'll go travel there. The rest of us, most of us don't see it. I personally don't see where to do that. But Hashem, God, guides our steps to be in that specific spot where the sparks that we need to rectify are located, and the circumstances in which we find ourselves are the greatest indicator that right here, right now, is where my mission is. If you weren't here for a specific reason, you wouldn't be here. Actually, the Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, who was actually his birthday yesterday, Rabbi Nachman of Breslov once said the fact that your birthday is the day, Jimmy, this is for you also, your birthday is the day that God decided that the world can no longer exist without you. And the circumstances in which you find yourself, the fact that you are where you are, living March, I think, the 15th of 2021, we're living on Staten Island or we're on vacation, wherever we might be. Any interaction that we find, that we come across in this world is for a reason. There's a purpose behind it. And any interaction you have with another person or with the world around you, truth is, even with yourself, the circumstances in which you find yourself are specific. And there's a reason for those circumstances. And if there wasn't a reason for it, it wouldn't happen to you. So the fact you are where you are and you're doing what you're doing and you're with who you're with is an indication that right here, right now, there are sparks. There's a piece of this world that I need to elevate. There's a piece of this world that I need to reveal the divinity behind. So this is just another clue to help us understand what our mission in this world is. We could use our strengths and our passions, our weaknesses and our struggles and our circumstances to give us as much of a hint as possible to identify what we need to accomplish in this world. So we're going to end up class first by circling back to the true or false questions. Then we're going to say one more point. And obviously, I'm sure lots of you have lots of questions, and we'll be here. The meters, don't worry, the meter's not running. So let's go back to those 7 true or false questions we asked on page 175. First of all, belief in reincarnation is basic to Judaism, true or false? Truth is, it depends how you define basic. It's something that's believed in Judaism, and it does have important ramifications for the way we see the world. But if it's basic or not, that's up to interpretation. The second question, in the Jewish view, reincarnation means that a soul that inhabited one body returns to inhabit another. Again, this is another trick question, because on the one hand, it's another incarnation, it's another iteration of the soul of the stem soul. But on the other hand, this part of the soul that inhabited another body is spun off and constituted in a new soul, which inhabits a separate body. Question number 3, a human soul can be reincarnated in a non-human entity such as an animal or a plant. This, as we saw, is true. That is true. It's a rare circumstance, but it can happen. Number 4, a reincarnated soul does not have its own identity, but shares its identity with someone who lived in a previous lifetime. This is incorrect. Like we explained, the newly spun off spark that has its own unique identity and personality is related, quote unquote, to the previous incarnation only by virtue of the shared divine sparks that animate it. But it has its own identity, it has its own consciousness, its own personality, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's very important for us to stress again. Question number 5 was that the purpose of doing good in one's current lifetime is to be reincarnated as a person of higher status in a future reincarnation. This is not at all the Jewish understanding of reincarnation. I understand that other religions have this idea. I'm not sure if it's the Hindus or the Buddhists that you want to spin off to a higher reincarnation, but that's not a Jewish idea. Number 6, soul is reincarnated as a penalty for sins committed in a prior lifetime. It's not a penalty. Rehabilitation would be a better word. It's not a penalty. It's not a punishment. It's just a chance to rehabilitate. Number 7, most souls today are reincarnations. This is in fact correct. So now, one last point I want to make before we get to the questions. Like we said, right now, towards the end of Jewish history, we're nearing the end of our collective mission. So the Arizal tells us, the Arizal, on whose works we based all of tonight's class, all the discussions about reincarnation, tells us that our souls, the souls of the last generation before Mashiach, are reincarnations of the generation that left Egypt. Meaning that the neshamas that are living now, right before the ultimate redemption, are the reincarnation of the souls of the people who lived during the Exodus of Egypt. So now regarding the Exodus from Egypt, do you know why we left Egypt? Why we were able? In whose merit did we leave Egypt? So the Talmud, the rabbis tell us that we left Egypt, the schus nashim tzidkanius. So our forefathers left Egypt, Pesach time, in 2 weeks. We left Egypt due to the merit of righteous women. If it wasn't for the women that were alive during the times of Moses and the Exodus of Egypt, we never would have left. So the Arizal tells us, the Rebbe tells us the same thing is true today. Text 14. Text 14 on page 194. Jewish women and girls play an essential role in the highly critical mission of bringing about the true and complete redemption. The women played an indispensable role in our exodus from Egypt. Indeed, our sages state that our ancestors were redeemed from Egypt in the merit of the deeds of the righteous women. As we have discussed repeatedly, they fulfill this role in each subsequent generation. This is especially true of our present time, for we are the reincarnation of the generation that left Egypt. Indeed, we can clearly observe that Jewish women and girls are naturally predisposed far more readily than the menfolk to the idea of immediately leaving the exile. Less effort is required to convince them that we must leave this exile already than it is required to inspire the men. So the Rebbe was saying that basically women need to keep doing their jobs and men need to give the respect to women that they deserve. And the Rebbe actually pointed out that if you look now, women hold a more prominent place in our culture probably than any other time in human history. And the Rebbe says this is a reflection of the fact that women are leading the charge towards the Exodus, towards the final redemption. Just like it was in their merit that we were able to leave Egypt, it will be in the merit of nashim tzidkanius, righteous women, that we will be able to fulfill the mission of all of creation, of all of our souls, with the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu, so next week is actually going to be the conclusion of our course. We're going to talk about another fun topic, resurrection, which is a little bit different than reincarnation, but resurrection in the time of Mashiach, and talking generally about how death should inform the life that we live while we're alive. So thank you all for joining us again. I'm sure we have lots of questions. Stay around for that, and we'll be here to help you with those.
Rabbi Mendy.
Yes, my friend Shelley.
Page 194 is true of today with men and women because men never ask directions. In the time of Moses, all those women knew what to do, and they knew the right way.
Yep.
So it's carried forward for so many thousands of years. We're back where we started from.
It all comes full circle.
You got it. Now, one other thing that I read before in one of the pages, it said that you could have a reincarnation with a soul, or you could have a fresh soul without being reincarnated.
Yes.
And then I said to myself, if you're going to be a fresh soul and you start to do evil things and you have no way of comparing what the old soul was with, you're just a bad person and you have no way of changing your neshama.
There's no such thing as bad people, Shelley. We just do bad things.
You do bad things. Well, that's what I'm saying. Yes.
Yeah.
So the combination of an old soul and a reincarnated or a new one together gives you the right path to follow in life.
All right, Bubby, are you hanging up or are you hanging around?
No, but
okay. Yes, ma'am.
Call me tomorrow. I want to tell you a story, okay?
Oh, okay, all right.
Do we have a class next week, Rabbi?
Wonderful.
Yes, there's one more class next week.
Okay.
All right.
Rabbi,
anybody else have any questions?
Yes, Rabbi.
Yeah, Martin.
What were the deeds that women merited to facilitate exile versus what men did?
So men apparently, based on what the Talmud tells us, the men got distracted by Egyptian culture, and they also gave up. They gave up. The men, the Jewish men, gave up. And if it wasn't for Jewish women encouraging the men to hold the faith, it would have been over, even before Moses showed up. Interestingly, just to give one example, when Paro famously said that all Jewish baby boys should be thrown into the river, correct? So Moses' father, this was before Moses was born. So Moses' father's name was Amram, He was practically the leader of the Jewish people at that time. So he separated from his wife. He said, why should I bring babies into this world? I don't want to bring babies into such a cruel world. So his little daughter, Miriam, who at that time was 6 years old, she told him, Dad, you're even worse than Paro, because Paro wants to destroy the Jewish baby boys. You want to destroy Jewish baby boys and girls. You have to do what you have to do, and Hashem takes care of what he has to do. And it was only because of that that Amram remarried his wife, and only because of that that Moshe Rabbeinu himself was born.
Amen.
I'm sorry? Okay.
Amen. Amen.
Amen. I think I heard something.
Rabbi, I have a question about reincarnation and basically, is there a finite amount of souls? Because with all these stem souls that you're talking about, it almost feels like whatever your mission is, and all these branches, and then there's these branches that are performing these additional, almost like you're morphing into multiple different souls. It's almost like you don't have a particular full. So my understanding of it's a little warped from this whole chapter.
I'll try to do a brief recap and see if it helps. All right. So you had the 600,000 souls that stood at Sinai. They were all tasked with a mission. Their mission was to reveal God through doing Torah mitzvahs. But through doing Torah mitzvahs means doing all of Torah and all of mitzvahs. And these souls were not like the souls that most of us, that you and I live with. Those souls were root souls. So they were able to spin off into other neshamas. So it is true that there are neshamas that you could call your kindred spirits. There's such an idea in Kabbalah, that there are other souls that come from that share a root soul with you. And only through all of you together doing all the mitzvahs are you able to accomplish your root soul's mission. Because
so it's almost that's where the confusion is. It's almost like in the physical world, a child like is the continuation of you, but it's still not you. So
think of it as a tree. You have a tree, and then you have the trunk. The trunk branches out into different branches, and those branches go into different twigs, right? It's all one entity, but they're diverse. You could say it's a different branch, but it's part of the same tree.
Right. So if we're just a piece or a branch of a root soul, what gives us our unique, in the spiritual realm, our unique, here's the soul that's coming back, when our time is up.
Because that neshama, that original root neshama is able to generate countless neshamas. An important thing to remember about neshamas, or being that they're a part of God, being that they're a part of godliness, they're infinite. So they have the ability to produce infinite sparks, if need be. So your neshama are those sparks that didn't rectify what they needed to, and you're kind of grafted a new neshama with a new identity, with a new consciousness, but you're still a branch off that same tree.
But Rabbi Mendy, can I ask you something?
Sure.
When you talk about a soul, we can't visualize a soul because we can't visualize Hashem, right?
100%.
So you talk about these sparks. It's very hard for me to understand what are the sparks in relation to the soul? What are the sparks?
You're saying what exactly?
You talk about the sparks. You said infinite number of souls. That means you can branch out forever.
If need be.
It's
yes.
Infinite.
If it needs to.
Well, we know that it needs to, because how many people study the Torah and how many people do all the mitzvot?
Yeah, exactly.
Not in Israel. And if you can only come back 3 times, I'm going to end up in Iraq.
So the 3 times thing, I should have been more clear. I thought I stressed this. That's only if you're not making progress. If you're not making progress, then it's 3 times and you're out. Most people make progress, correct? You have to be a real no-goodness not to make any progress through an entire lifetime.
But
and
what
that's
are
when we say,
sparks?
I'm sorry?
Are sparks? What
the
are
sparks are part of the original neshama that can be spun off into a new neshama. It's a part of the branch neshama. I'm sorry,
Sparks can
the
be,
root neshama. I'm sorry,
the sparks can be spun off from the root neshama.
from the root neshama to make a new neshama. Yes.
And what happens to the neshama that the sparks went away from?
What do you mean? The root neshama stays. It's kind of like that tree, that a branch grows off the tree. Verstehst?
I don't know if I verstehe. It's
Just chew on it. And Beatrice, we can talk tomorrow. We'll talk more if you need to. All right?
Rabbi, one more thing, just,
Sure.
so, when a soul goes up to a Gad Eden, right, after its process or whatever it is. And then if you are branching off, let's say sparks or partial, or you have parts of your neshama, not the whole neshama. So that's the concept that I'm having a hard time understanding.
Right.
Where are you and, you know, the family that does Yisker and everything else, is the neshama there, or is it partially there with lots of different pieces of it still here, reincarnated into other little pieces?
Those who are doing
or
Shiva.
pregnant into that other.
Alan, so
part of
I'm gonna write something up and send it to you, and hopefully it'll clarify that for you. I think I understand what your question is exactly. I think I do.
Okay.
All right. So I'm gonna
maybe
type
it's
something up.
to me
Rabbi,
too.
one word,
Okay.
let me ask you one question more.
Yeah, go, Shelley.
The neshama, when it comes in or recycles itself or wherever it develops, and in my lifetime, I've always used the word bashet.
Mm-hmm.
And is the neshama coming under the headline of bashet, and it knows where, when, and how it will develop into the next physical being?
For a
Is
relationship.
that governed by the higher authority?
Are you asking about the Bashert? Are you talking about a soulmate? Is that what you're talking about?
No, if you take my word bashet, I live by, because I am governed by a higher authority that's pointed me many times in a different direction.
Okay.
And now the neshama is coming by itself, or is it being directed by the bashet?
So it's being directed by Hashem, but it is being directed by God. It's just being that when
To
we're in the body.
me, God is bashet.